see a lot of slides on a Friday. So I'll do this quickly and then I'll hand it over to Ben to get into the cool stuff. So basically, I just want to give a little bit of background about ThousandEyes, where the idea came from, and kind of what we're here to help with. So basically, ThousandEyes was born out of this idea that, your world used to look a lot like this, right? Where everything was within your four walls, you had a lot of visibility into all the different facets of your environment and network, and you were able to find and fix problems a lot more quickly whenever things came up. Um, and you had a lot more control over the digital experiences that you were delivering. But now, as your world looks a little bit more like this, everything's a lot more dispersed. You're relying on third-party providers and vendors to help with different, parts of your network and the digital experience you're delivering. It's become a lot harder to find these problems that are impacting digital experiences, and takes a lot longer to troubleshoot and find these issues. So we're seeing a lot more problems and issues come up for companies, and it's taking a lot longer to get them back up and running as usual. So we have a couple of vantage points that we combine to configure your deployment using. Ben's going to get into that in the platform and walk through them, but just to give you a quick brief overview of them, we've got cloud agents. These are hosted by us all over the world. We've got them in tier 1, 2, 3 provider networks, as well as broadband providers here in the US. And then also the 5 big public cloud providers. So you point these towards an IP, a URL, or another agent. You're able to get that outside in perspective from that specific geolocation. Second is our enterprise agents, essentially the same type of software, but these are hosted within your 4 walls. We've got a bunch of different deployment methods here. Again, Ben will get into those in the platform, but basically, a sneak peek, we have everything from, like a Hyper-V to a VM. We just rolled out a native Cat9 integration, and then we can deploy on everything down to like Raspberry Pi or Intel NUCs. So that's Enterprise Agent, and they're typically deployed in branch offices, data centers, and they're going to give you that more internal, granular, bidirectional visibility. And then last but not least is our Endpoint Agent. Has been super popular during COVID. These are typically deployed on employee workstations, and the reason they've been valuable during COVID is, help desks have been overwhelmed trying to troubleshoot issues with people working from home. And, it's really hard to be able to decipher if it's a problem with someone's home network or actually the application or service they're accessing. So Endpoint gives you that full end-to-end visibility as well. Okay, so I promised I would not share very many slides, so I'm going to stop at 3, and I'm going to hand it over to Ben.
Awesome. Thanks, Ellen. I'm going to go ahead and share. I do want to take a moment just to, give you some visuals on these 3 agent types. Right now, I'm specifically flashing our cloud agents to start. I just want to stress that, globally dispersed, super easy to leverage within the platform. Again, because they're maintained by ThousandEyes, we're 2 clicks away from, from running a test, emulating a user coming out of any of these geos. Couple other tips that I want to stress about our cloud agent is we're going to have dedicated agents in specific broadband providers in the US. So super easy for us to compare performance coming out of San Jose from AT&T's network versus Verizon. Again, because we already have vantage points deployed in these networks. On top of that, we're also going to have some cloud presence, Azure, GCP, AWS, as well as Alibaba Cloud. Again, agents deployed in all of the regions we see listed here. Again, we're 3 clicks away from running a test, emulating a user coming out of any of these locations. But the second vantage point that I want to put your eyes on here is going to be our enterprise agent. I just want to stress that functionally, this is the same piece of software as our cloud agents. So at the end of the day, we treat them very similarly within the platform, and they have the same capabilities in terms of tests. The only difference being, you can stand this up within your 4 walls. Like Ellen said, branch offices, DCs is the most common deployment we see of this one, but everything from Hyper-V, standard VM, Linux package is completely standard. We can now deploy on some Cisco devices, Cat9Ks, ISRs, ASRs. Docker container is very popular. Like Ellen said, Nook as well as Raspberry Pis are also lightweight appliances that we can deploy on. So fortunately, these all do the same thing. It's all about getting that internal perspective to perform your testing. And finally, endpoint agents, I won't touch on this too long, other than we're going to be able to do very similar testing, except from an end user's device. Macro Windows is what we support out of the box. I will definitely show you an example of how this comes into play, but all about that work from home monitoring. But also, now that we're clear on our 3 agent types here at ThousandEyes, I'm going to jump into an example. I'm going to start by looking at our cloud and enterprise agents to start. And to start, I am going to be focusing on an example that is targeting O365, specifically SharePoint. But it's the first thing I want to point out about our platform is that we are completely vendor agnostic. Our approach is fully synthetic, meaning we really don't care what these destinations are. As long as they're accessible from the locations we've chosen to run the test, we're going to be providing metrics on multiple layers that we see on the left here, ranging from application experience, breaking down to network, and finally BGP, all time correlated. Now, when I talk about a test to O365, I'm actually showing you one of the more intense tests that we can run here at ThousandEyes. This is what we call a transaction test type. What we're doing here, and I will flash the script, is having our agents go through a very specific set of actions every interval. So what I want you guys to understand here is that this is fully customizable. In this example, all we're doing is logging into O365, navigating to a portion of the page, and then downloading a document off of the site. These are really meant to be built custom. The whole idea here is we're going to be choosing specific locations to emulate a specific workflow that your users go through so that we can understand, every minute what performance looks like. And when I say every minute, I'm really referencing this timeline at the top of the screen. We really are meant to be an always on solution. Once we configure testing towards these critical destinations, it's meant to be always on and running in the background constantly. In this example, we can see that we have a data point that we can click into every 10 minutes. That's how often we've configured the test to run. Just understand we can go down to a 1-minute frequency if you need that type of granularity. Always on. I just want to stress a couple of the benefits here. One, when I see a drop in whatever metric I'm going to be looking at throughout our entire stack, that we really are meant to be able to throw real-time notifications and be proactive about these assets that we're responsible for. On top of that, you're going to get access to 30 days rolling worth of historical data so that we can traverse back in time, understand what performance looked like during steady state, establish baselines, and alert accordingly off deviations we see from that mean. But when I talk about a script at ThousandEyes, not only am I getting an understanding of the total time it's taking that user journey to take, I'm seeing around 39 seconds here on average on this time slice, but I'm also going to be able to digest this further. This waterfall view is going to essentially break down all the different steps that we're taking throughout this transaction. So I can see the initial load of the home page here. I can see the authentication process as we're getting logged in. And then finally, I can see the downloading of the document step at the end here. So getting a better understanding of where that slowness is stemming from when we see transaction time spike is ultimately the goal here. Giving you the insight to say, okay, that slowness is definitely stemming from the initial load of the home page, or maybe it's coming from that authentication process. I'm going to be able to throw a real-time notification for both situations. I can also provide some visual feedback, throughout the user journey, just to get a sense of what they're seeing during that point in time. It does help a lot when there's like page errors, again, just to better understand what that user is going through during that point in time. But besides this idea of a user journey in our transaction testing, we're also just going to test the front door. This HB server layer, ultimately what we're looking for here with our agents is server availability. Is the site alive? Is it available from all of the locations we've chosen to run the test? You'll notice that when I see a drop in availability, I can click into it very easily, immediately understand the scope of the problem. This did not impact all of the locations we chose to run the test, just this one located in Boston, but also we're getting a sense of the errors that we're seeing. If we were having a DNS issue right now, we would know about it versus maybe we're getting a 403 bad response code from the server. Those are two situations where I could throw independent notifications. However, when I see something like this, we're getting a timeout error, essentially just not enough data came back before we stopped the test. This makes me suspicious that there were other problems that might have impacted this application layer. Specifically on the network layer is where I'm suspicious right now. In order to confirm that, I'm going to jump to our path visualization in our network layer. And this is where we're going to get access to loss, latency, and jitter metrics in our timeline now, instead of that response time and availability perspective. So flipping to latency to give you something visual to look at here. The idea is very similar though. Again, testing every interval, performing an end-to-end ping style test, as well as building out this full hop by hop layer 3 topology. So the idea here, when I see a high latency spike or a packet loss, I can click into that time slice very easily and understand what that path looked like during that point in time. So agents are always going to be on the left here. I'll stress again, enterprise and cloud agents have exactly the same capabilities. So we could even include both an internal and external vantage point in the same test. But the whole idea is from our agents, we're going to have full visibility into every hop in between them and our destination, which in this point, we're probing into Microsoft's AS. But the whole idea here, all color coded, red is bad. I have the ability to hover over any of these providers I want insight into so that I can better understand that, for example, this red link is showing that Microsoft is adding 24 milliseconds into this path on this single hop. I can also identify this is in an MPLS tunnel. So this is our bread and butter in the sense that we can hold accountable all of these different providers we're riding to get to our critical destinations. If we were seeing application level problems, we're holding Microsoft accountable. We'd be highlighting this node red versus if we saw any internet specific problems, like we see here, we're all color coded. So we're surfacing these problems very quickly. Now, this might look fairly similar to a traceroute style test, you guys. And what we're doing here is similar. I do like to point out a couple of the key differences, however. One is going to be the protocol that we are using to conduct these tests. Within our test config, we are going to give you the option to do an ICMP-based test, very similar to a standard traceroute test. But we're also going to give you the ability to do TCP-based tests. And this is pretty critical to our strategy just because it makes our synthetics that much more trustworthy when we talk about probing across the public internet. I've seen situations where providers don't treat ICMP properly when we're performing these tests. It just makes our data that much more representative of actual user traffic. But awesome. I do like to point out once we've reached this point, there is somewhat of a so what in my eyes once we've reached this point. It's great we can get a real-time notification when something goes down. It's great we can point our finger at providers when we see network degradation end-to-end. But what do we actually do with this data? And this is really where the shareability of this information is going to come into play. In the upper right-hand corner, there is always going to be a share button at ThousandEyes. This will generate a read-only version of exactly what we're walking through together right now. So the idea is when we catch problems at ThousandEyes, we're one click away from being able to share the information that we're looking at right now. Notice my link at the top, share.thousandeyes.com. This actually is a share link, meaning totally publicly readable. It's still fully interactive, multi-layer, multi-time frame. The idea behind our share links is just preventing that classic finger pointing game that we're all aware of and just creating a more collaborative process in general. Even though we are blaming these providers, I have found that working with other customers, these ISPs are generally, very willing to receive this kind of feedback just because it's visibility that they may not have in the first place. The fact that I can pinpoint a specific IP to understand where that loss is stemming from just gives them visibility. And I have found it reduces that MTTR, MTTI in general. But awesome. The last layer that I want to get your eyes on here as it relates to cloud and enterprise agents is going to be our BGP visualization. And this is a layer that will always be included in ThousandEyes. The whole idea here is that we're building out the full AS path from all of these public monitors hosted worldwide towards, whatever prefix we're targeting. In this case, Microsoft is the origin AS because this is an O365 example. I just want to stress that this will change based on that test target. We have visibility into not only who Microsoft peers with, for example, I can see Quest, Level 3, as a couple examples here, but also upstream from them. I have full visibility into how all of these different providers are shaking hands. The whole idea here is getting a better handle on this BGP ecosystem, which is ultimately a dependency for that application or service delivery. Path changes are the metric in the timeline that we are going to leverage. So the whole idea here is getting notified in real time about these events that impact critical destinations, but then truly being able to understand the impact that that event has on your end user because we're capturing those layers above. Between our multi-layer view, we feel this really helps with cross-correlating and drilling down into problems where they reside. I always use a top-down approach where I look at more of these application layers, look for lack of availability, and then move down through our other layers so I can build out that full story of what happened. Now, in this example, I want to go back up to the top here and actually give you some insight into what we saw here. You'll notice that I'm going to go into this table view. If I just look at the total transaction time coming from our 4 different locations that we chose to run this test, you'll notice that this Boston agent is seeing significantly slower transaction times. I'm seeing almost 40 seconds versus around 20 seconds. So it's taking double the amount of time to go through that workflow that we set up to emulate. So what's going on here? And we can actually view this from a network perspective to figure out exactly what went on here. At the end of the day, I will spoil the story for you guys. This was a latency issue. So even though you might not think that something like 11 milliseconds of latency coming from that Boston agent impacts our end users, because we're doing something intense like downloading a document, it actually did impact specifically that Boston location because of latency. I have another example pulled up here where it's the same exact test. It was just a future time frame when we actually saw this return to steady state performance. And if I look at this Boston agent again from a latency perspective, you'll notice that now I'm seeing less than a millisecond of latency, which is normal. And if I flip back to our transaction layer, we can actually see that this drop in latency returned that Boston agent to the standard 20-ish second transaction time baseline. So I thought this was a pretty interesting story just because we're able to catch these changes as they're happening in real time. Again, even though you might not think 10 milliseconds of latency added into that path impacts your user, we found that it had a severe impact, and we were seeing double the time it takes to go through that standard workflow. So hopefully that was helpful. That was my first intro into enterprise and cloud agents. I do want to bring up another example here, stressing that, in this example, we were leveraging those cloud agents to run this test, that outside in experience into performance. We just selected various locations in critical cities around the US to run this test. I just want to point out that the enterprise agents have exactly the same capabilities. I pulled up a quick example here where we're now running from enterprise agents we've deployed in our internal locations at ThousandEyes. So these are DCs, branch offices that we deem critical. We're going to be able to do the same type of testing towards these different external destinations. So here's an example of where we're testing Salesforce now. Same end-to-end visibility, all color-coded. Dark blue hops are always going to be within the source network. So this is actually us backhauling back to our DC as we break out to the public internet. Light blue, same visibility that we get into these different providers. I can see Cogent here, as we're riding the public internet. I believe we get handed off to Comcast, as we're going to salesforce.com, which is going to always be these teal nodes as our destination. So inside out, outside in, again, it doesn't really matter to us because we're fully synthetic here. We're going to be able to perform these hop by hop analyses towards SaaS, cloud regions, internal assets. Again, we're totally vendor agnostic here. So hopefully this is helping you build a picture of what's possible with these cloud and enterprise agents. At the end of the day, one more thing I will point out, to get a test like this off the ground towards salesforce.com, quite literally all I need to do is type in the URL that I want to test, salesforce.com, select the 6 cloud or enterprise agents that I want to run this test, and click go. I can't stress how easy it is to set up our testing at ThousandEyes. It's all done within the platform, all cloud-based. You know, we're 4 clicks away to getting visibility like this set up in your guys' orgs. But awesome. You know, that's really all I had in terms of quick intros for our cloud and enterprise agents. One more use case I will point out for our enterprise agents so that we're crystal clear is that they often do come up a lot in WAN level testing. So if we ever want to do, you know, a site to site test, site to DC test, super easy for us to deploy an enterprise agent in both of those locations and set up an agent to agent test. You know, those agents are going to fire traffic towards each other and provide the visualizations that you see here, but more for that internal WAN use case. I'm going to pivot now to our third vantage point. This is going to be specifically our endpoint agent. So keep in mind, I am shifting perspectives here. You know, instead of talking about a cloud agent that's pre-deployed and maintained by ThousandEyes, or an enterprise agent that lives at a DC or branch location, I'm now going to be talking about our endpoint that actually sits on an end user workstation, Mac or Windows. A little bit of context on what we're looking at here. We see Troy on the left. This is an internal example. Troy is a ThousandEyes employee. Ultimately, the first thing I want to point out is that you're going to have full control over the destinations that we test on the right side of the screen here. You know, these are just resources that Troy happens to leverage to do work every day. But again, we're completely vendor agnostic. The whole idea here is that we customized this list of destinations around Troy's specific needs. So on the right here, we can see app.thousandeyes. We can see some of the Okta resources, as well as some of the G Suite. Now, in this example, Troy actually called in complaining about lack of access to his Gmail. Because we had the endpoint agent running on his machine proactively, always on, same strategy as this cloud and enterprise agents, we were able to very easily catch this problem. You know, because we have full visibility from Troy's computer to his access point, we can see his gateway here as we break out to the public internet. Same type of visibility that we're going to be able to provide, you know, just running these tests from the end user device. So I can see this Mediacom Communications Corp. I can see as we're going towards app.thousandeyes, you know, we get handed off to Zayo as an example here. So same full end-to-end visibility. Again, all color coded the same as our cloud and enterprise agents. It should be fairly obvious. In this example, we were able to very easily identify that this was a provider issue. The Mediacom Communications Corp ISP coming out of Troy's house was dropping 86% of the packets that we were sending towards Gmail from Troy's computer. So this is all about, you know, bringing back the visibility that you had when users were in those office locations. This has gotten an incredible response over the past year, as you guys probably would have guessed from the work from home shift from COVID. This is all I've been talking about for the past 6 months. There's a lot of value that I've seen my customers get just because we're talking about managing now all of these different home networks. You know, how do we communicate with them? How do we provide better feedback when we do see problems? And this is how exactly we're going to do that. But one big bonus of our endpoint agent, you know, besides this ISP application view that we're going to give you into performance, again, every single minute from your users' devices, we're also going to build out a dedicated tab for the local networks coming from the machines. And this is all about getting you closer to these home environments. But the whole idea, I'll give you the full drop down of metrics here. From everything, something as simple as what is the wireless signal quality coming from Troy's device, to we're going to test gateways independently, provide a loss and latency metric around that experience. Same with DNS servers. We're going to provide a resolution time on top of that. We're even going to provide some hardware level metrics, CPU load and memory. So the whole idea here, when X user calls in, we should have proactive data points constantly running in the background from their machine so that we can understand, traverse back in time to understand what baseline performance looks like. When they complain, we're always going to have the ability to drill into data, whether it's stemming from retransmission rates on their router, maybe it's an overload on something like memory, or maybe it's something on the internet, like we just looked at with Mediacom communications. All three situations, we're going to be able to diagnose your end user's problems, better communicate them, give them an understanding of what's going on so that we can fix and reduce that MTTI. Now, another thing I always like to highlight here, and give me a couple seconds to pull this up, but we are collecting a lot of data with our endpoint agent. I always like to highlight consumption, and this is really more speaking towards alerts, reporting, and dashboards. But really, what I want to show you guys is actually our internal endpoint agent dashboard. And dashboards are going to operate very similarly to like a drag and drop style website builder. I just pulled our internal work from home dashboard up. The whole idea here is these are fully customizable. We've built a variety of widgets ranging from map views that you see here, stoplight style indicators. We're going to be able to build out these single page views and pull the metrics that you care about and display them in a more efficient, graphical method. So what we're doing here is we're showing things like, who has their computer on open across the world in this simple map view. But then we're going to get into this idea of showing what does response time look like per region of the world towards known critical SaaS applications. So all color coded, easy to understand. For example, that users coming out of Europe might be complaining more for docs.microsoft.com compared to something like Outlook. So high level, we're always bubbling up the worst performers in this view. Again, I'll stress that we're going to build these for specific users, teams. They really are meant to be customized. The final thing I'll show you here is at the bottom, we are showing some per user stats, CPU load, memory, Wi-Fi quality, gateway latency. And there is a self-service aspect that I like to stress here. When someone like myself or Ellen is having problems accessing, let's say, salesforce.com, we can quickly log into this view and understand, is it a me problem? Is Ellen a worse performer for something like memory? Or is there a more overarching outage that's impacting all of my region? We have found that this opens less tickets in general internally. Not sure you would leverage this strategy. I just think it's a great example of what's possible with our dashboards and reports. All right. Now, I want to start speaking to one of the integrations that we have done because of the Cisco acquisition is going to be focused around our endpoint agent. And this is specifically going to come into play with VPNs. Now, today, we are going to support Palo Alto as well as AnyConnect out of the box. Again, keep in mind, this is custom, so it is going to be specific to those clients. But I do want to highlight this functionality for you guys because I do think it's very cool and valuable to our customers. Different example now, we're going to be talking about Scott with our endpoint agent deployed on his machine. Now, in this example, instead of running tests towards a SaaS application that's, when we're going to take a direct internet route out of his house, we're now talking about a resource on the right here, ThousandEyes.zendesk.com, that's only accessible via a VPN or on-prem. So it's an internally only accessible destination. Now, we can actually see that Scott is using a VPN in this network path. This purple circle, we're going to populate it with this icon just to make it more clear where that head end resides. What we're looking at right now is what I would call the overlay path. If we were to run a traceroute style test from Scott's MacBook towards this destination on the right, this is what the hop by hop would produce. We're getting encapsulated. So we only have visibility into that one hop towards the VPN head end, but then we have insight into every hop past that, understanding where those high latency links are. This is great. The problem is, let's say a user called in complaining here, you have no visibility into the actual ISP performance that's coming out of their house towards that head end. So this is where our functionality is going to come into play. Our agent is intelligent enough to understand a VPN connection is in play here, and it will actually run a separate test towards that head end, exposing the entire underlay path. So now you guys will have the ability to say to your end users, okay, I understand you're having a slow experience on this destination, this application, but I can also identify, oh, apologies. I can also identify that, uh, you know, specifically NTT is adding 120 milliseconds of latency within that VPN tunnel. I can also identify this is in an MPLS tunnel as well. But that is the whole idea, being able to hold accountable, better communicate with your end users, when we do see ISPs coming out of their house, cause problems. And the last thing I'll stress about this functionality is that it does come out of the box. As long as you leverage one of the clients we support, I will be transparent that one of the requirements to get this functionality working will be a split tunnel config. If you're tunneling all your traffic to, through that VPN from your end users' devices, there's no way I'm going to be able to expose this. As long as we have any, destination split out, I'm going to be able to provide this out of the box. The endpoint agent's going to build it automatically. But awesome. That was our endpoint agent. Again, I will point out the flexibility here, because we are solely IP or URL based in terms of our testing targets, there's a lot of flexibility within our tool. Whether we're talking about work from home users, outside in customer facing digital experience, inside out, employee digital experience. There's a lot of ways we can tailor our testing to better fit your guys' needs. On top of that, I will speak to a couple of the integrations that we have done with Cisco recently. The main one that I will touch on today is going to be App Dynamics. So just understand that the dashboard environments that I previously showed you with our endpoint agents, all of those widgets we can directly drop into App Dynamics dashboard. So if you're looking for that consolidated view, how is my application performing, as well as how is that outside in digital experience running from ThousandEyes agents performing, we can build that single page view again because of that integration, just making your lives easier. When we see problems with ThousandEyes agents, we'll have that insight with App Dynamics to understand if it's an us problem or something on the public internet. And finally, I will on alerting briefly here. Just understand that any of the metrics that you've seen me go over today are going to be alertable. On top of that, I want to share with you our native integrations. Besides App Dynamics, we are going to be able to pipe into Slack, PagerDuty, ServiceNow, as well as App Dynamics on top of that. So if you use one of these today, again, we're a few clicks away from getting our notifications sent there. So there is a lot to do with the platform. I do want to pause. I have been asking a lot of questions here. Is now a good time to, jump into the chat and answer a few questions if anyone has any?
Was I don't know if this is something that you can speak to, Ben. There was a question around agent support or as far as the Cisco product line. So we're clearly aware that the agent can be run natively on the Cat 9K, the 9300 and the 9400. Can you speak to some of that compatibility with other products or timelines within the Cisco portfolio?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So one, it is going to be containerized is how we're actually deploying on these. SSD will be required for the Cat 9Ks, 9300s, 9400s is what we support today. In terms of future integrations, I'm not going to be able to speak to hard timelines here, and I apologize for that. But I do know in the future that we are planning on deploying enterprise agents natively on Meraki devices in the near future. So the idea is it's just going to be that much easier to spin up a vantage point on those devices. You push out to different locations, even work from home users. I've seen customers leverage those for. So the whole idea is we're going to have that enterprise agent available for testing immediately as soon as we spin up that Meraki device, which is just going to make testing and the strategy easier in general. Other than that, I don't know about too many more integrations, unless Ellen, you've heard something.
Thanks, Ben. No, that's great. Exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions I can help with?
I think that's it. I will take silence as no questions.
Silence
But
is a
no,
good thing.
yeah, exactly. Ben, thank you so much. This was super. It was great to be able to see the different use cases that Thousand Eyes can help with. Again, we're going to be posting this recording to our YouTube channel. We'll send that link out shortly after this call concludes. Again, thank you for everyone's time on a Friday before a holiday weekend. We greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next session. Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks for the time, guys. I appreciate it.